Okay, I just want to try. I just want to try a couple more. I want to go through a couple more worked examples with you guys, and I want to get to a couple that have infinity, that going to infinity. So we're asked to give the domain in interval notation. We're going to start on the left. I see an open circle, so it is not included in the set. Moving from left to right, I'm at -1, 2, 3, 4, so I'm at -4. And I'm moving from small to big. I'm moving from left to right and going to the right hand edge of my graph is right here, and I'm at +1, 2, 3, 4, and the right hand edge of my graph is an open circle, so that's not included in the set, so I'm going to use a parentheses. And I see that this number, -4, is smaller than this number, so I've written this correctly. Let's try the range now. We're going to try the range now, so we're going to start at the bottom of the graph, which is here. And we're at -2. I see 2 open circles, so it's not included in the set. I'm moving from bottom to top. I'm going up this way from small to big. My graph ends here. It's a series of closed points. It's a line. It's a series of closed points. It's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up. And since it's closed points, it is included in the set, and I'm going to use a bracket. Let's try another one. Okay, we've experienced some type of technical difficulty, but hopefully we're good now. So we're going to try the domain we're going to go from left to right. And if I see the left-hand edge of my graph over here, what do I have? I see an arrow. So I have something that is headed to infinity. Well, we're only looking now at the x values. So what is all the way over here on the left-hand side of my graph? This side is -infinity. And we're moving along the graph, and then where does it end? Another arrow. So over here, just looking at the x values all the way over here, keep going forever and ever and ever, we're at +infinity. So we always use a parentheses with infinity. My graph starts at -infinity for the domain, and it ends at +infinity, and we close that off with a bracket. Let's look at the range. Okay, let's look at the range. So we're going to start at the bottom edge of our graph, Looking at the bottom edge of the graph, and we are at -1, 2, 3, 4, and we're looking at a series of closed points. I'm struggling so much with the technical stuff today, guys. I'm so sorry. Here we go. We're looking at a series of closed points, and so this -4 is included in the set. And I'm going to move from small to big. I'm moving up the graph. I see arrows. And so where is my graph headed? Off this way to infinity, off this way to infinity. And even though when we were looking at the domain, this was considered the left-hand side of the graph and it was -infinity, well, now we're only really we're looking at the range. We're just looking up here. Everything above this line is positive, and so the graph ends at +infinity, and we're going to close that off with a parentheses. Let's try a couple more. Just going to use this color. The domain, so we're starting on the left-hand side of the graph. We're at -1, 2, 3, and I see a series of closed points, so this is included in the set, -3. And where does my graph end? Moving from left to right. I see these arrows. I'm over here. Everything on the right-hand side of this line is positive, and so therefore this graph ends at +infinity, and I'm going to close that off with the parentheses. Now let's look at the range. Moving from bottom to top, the lowest thing I see here is an arrow. Everything under this line is negative. Everything above it is positive. So where does this graph begin? It begins at negative infinity. And moving from bottom to top, where does it end? I see another arrow. Everything above this line is positive, and so it ends at positive infinity. And I close those off with parentheses. That is the domain and range of this graph in interval notation. And this is the last one I'll work through with you guys. So we're looking at the domain first. I go to the left edge of my graph. I see I'm at -1. And I see a closed circle. And moving across my graph from left to right, where does my graph end? Well, even though this is pointing down, remember that I'm looking at this line. These are negative. Over here is positive. And so this graph ends at positive infinity, and I'm going to close it off with a parentheses. And keep in mind what I said before. Remember, this number here on the left should always be smaller than this number on the right, and this one is. So this is correct. All right, let's take a look at the range. Moving from the bottom, well, I think that there's some type of intuition that you want to start with the end point, but that's not how this works. We're always going to be starting at the bottom. We're always moving from bottom to top, and therefore, from bottom to top, where am I starting? I'm starting here. Where's the bottom edge of this graph? Well, it's at negative infinity. This number should be smaller, the one on the left, and then I'm going to move up my graph, and where does it end? The top edge of my graph is right here at 1, 2, 3, positive 3. It's a closed circle, and so I'm going to close that off with a bracket. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.